Socrates once said that the unexamined life is not worth living. As modern people, how do we decide what deserves examination?
Well, I think the thing to do there is to note that the unexamined part has to be taken very seriously by Socrates. Um, uh, I think I've argued what he's talking about are sort of three interrelated things. One is we're not paying attention to what we don't know, in the sense that we're often acting as if we know when we do not. We're deceiving ourselves in a very fundamental way. This is often the case because what we find salient, attractive, appealing far exceeds our understanding or grasp of the truth of whatever it is that has grasped our attention. And that means for Socrates, he claimed to know ta erotica. He claimed to know eros, how the erotic things. He claimed to know what to properly love, what to properly care about. And so, in answer to your question, I would say to people, where's your love? Where's your love at? And then and I hope after saying that that doesn't sound like a Hallmark card. But like what is it you're devoting your time and your attention to, and how much is it putting you into a more trustworthy relationship with reality? That you're deceiving yourself less, that you're connected to things that are not merely ephemeral or superficial, but you're connected to things that are much more long lasting. You're connected to them in a way you can share with other people so that you can be their friend and they can be your friend. You can call out the good in each other. It helps more of your experience be permeated by beauty, so you're getting better and better at seeing through appearances into the depths of things. This is what I think Socrates would recommend to us. He wouldn't recommend so much what as how, to my mind, we're looking at things, and that therefore what needs examination. I could see somebody being in a religious setting and nevertheless falling prey to everything that Socrates was worried about. And so I tend to make it a little bit much more emphasis on the how, because he did a lot of work sort of demolishing people's attempts to state the what. He does this repeatedly in the dialogues. People will say honor is this or courage is that, and and typically what he's trying to do is get them to shift their focus off their propositional definitions and onto their skills and their states of mind that give them certain perspectives, and their character traits that bind them to the world in an orienting way.
When we talk about Socratic style of dialogue, I always think of it as distributed thinking, where you
Yep.
debate with someone else, and then as a result of that debate, you realize the truth of something. So, how does this relate to that idea of distributed cognition?
Well, I've argued very much, and if I've got a couple of papers published around this with Rick Rapetti, Christopher Massapietro, Taylor Barrett. We've come up with a whole practice we call dialectic into dialogos that's designed to afford this. And there's lots of good work. A good initial start is to look at The Enigma of Reason by Mercier and Sperber, Novaes' book on the dialogical origins of deduction, that our cognition works much better when we plug into a distributed network than when we were trying to do it monologically on our own. Because given what I said a few minutes ago, it's very hard to see your own biases. It's very easy from the outside of a perspective to see somebody else's bias. So we can help each other transcend our bias. We can help each other. Plato has this metaphor of circumambulation. All of our we can sort of journey through all of our perspectives around the thing and get a realization of whatever it is that we're trying to understand much better than we could from any one perspective. And that's very often what's happening in a Socratic dialogue. Is you're getting this journeying between perspectives, often represented by different people in the dialogue. Thrasymachus is very important at the beginning of the Republic. Glaucon and Adimatos are more important later on, etc. And so, yeah, I think what Plato is trying to do with dialectic is he's not trying to come up with a particular logic of intelligibility, say perhaps the way Hegel did. What he's trying to do is he's trying to find out what are those conditions of conversation and character and communication and cognition and consciousness that afford this We use the word logos. The logos, and Socrates said, "I will follow the logos wherever it goes." This logos, this dynamical system that takes on a life of its own and takes everybody in a direction and a place and reorients them in ways they could not do on their own. And it's interesting when that happens when we do these practices with people, because you very often get something that sounds like Platonic anamnesis. People will say, "I've always been looking for this, but I didn't realize it." So
Yeah, that's a crucial point there because I've seen a criticism also of Socrates in a way that, yeah, when you ask those questions, you get the other person reveal something that you wanted them to reveal rather than that person actually coming up with that idea. I've seen that criticism a lot,
yep.
maybe from people that criticize Plato and Socrates a lot. So it's kind of difficult for me to identify like whether that is true or whether that is relevant criticism or not.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that Plato is doing that in the writing, but we have to remember that he will very frequently have Socrates demolish other positions only to demolish his own position. That often also happens, and it seems to be more often not that something is being revealed so much as like a particular proposition or a particular position, as Plato is trying to get people to see the kind of stance, the kind of agency, the kind of identity, the kind of role they're coming into an argument with, and that is fundamentally more important. I mean, I happen to think the seventh letter is authentic. There's debates about that, but in it, Plato's basically saying, you really can't propositionally teach somebody. You have to live with them. He sounds like a Zen master, right? You have to live with them and you have to spend time with them, and right, they have to sort of imitate you and internalize you and indwell you, and you have to do the same. You have to sort of reciprocally open, and only then maybe a spark will catch and transfer from the teacher to the student. And so I'm not so sure that it's fair to say that Plato is doing these sort of simplistic rhetorical things. He seems to be hunting much more subtle quarry and query, and doing it in a really really artistic way.
So, in a sense, truth is within me, but it can come out only with the right examination, right questioning.
Well, I would say it a little bit differently. And although I mean that metaphor is used by Plato, Socrates claims he's a midwife. He can help people to give birth to themselves. But notice that metaphor. He doesn't say he's talking about how they're born again, like to use one of Jesus of Nazareth's phrase. Uh, but I mean, following especially the work of my friend and somebody whose work I admired deeply, William Desmond, and Plato's notion of the metaxu, that we are between. I think the truth is between us. That's what Plato would say better. And that we need to do this circumambulation and mutual transformation and let the logos on a life of its own and take shape of its own. Only then, in those transformations and in that shared creation of new meaning and new ways of looking, is the truth possible for us.
So, how does that relate to this distinction between meaning or truth being discovered, whether being created?
Well, maybe created. Yeah, perhaps you're right. I think created. I like a word that Carey uses in his book on Augustine, the Latin word inventio. It's both, which means both to discover and to invent. Um, and if you look carefully, and William Desmond argues this too about at Plato, the metaxu, the notion of participation and in betweenness. When you're participating in something, you're not making it, but you're not merely receiving it. And this is what happens when people get into these practices. They'll say, obviously they are doing something. They are saying things, they're creating alternative meanings for a term, but they're also accepting the changes, and they're all inhabiting each other. So it's this notion of inventio. You're participating. It's that, and this lines up with 4e cog sci for me, that you're not just, it's neither the empiricist, you're receiving truth, or the rationalist, you're imposing truth, or the Kantian framework or something like that. It's more that the world and you are co-creating meaning and truth together.
So, I read the Plato Symposium long, long time ago. I think I need to reread it again
It's a great
to
book.
get, yeah, it's great. And I see the connection between what you just described at the beginning, the love.
Yes.
So how does that get explored in that context, in the meaning making and also love and also truth seeking?
Oh well, I mean, you know, the symposium and also the Phaedrus. But let's do with the symposium. I mean, the symposium is famously where the metaxu of human beings is brought out. That we are between. We are between. We are between the animals and the gods, kind of thing. And also, eros is between. Eros is a demigod, is between humanity and divinity, and philosophy is also in between, and Socrates is in between. You're getting all these in betweenings, and so I think that you're right. That's a major theme, and I think what's being spoken of in love is exactly the kind of thing that happens when people are doing these kinds of practices. So if you and I, this is Aaron's work. Aaron's a last name, not a first name. If we do what's called mutually accelerating disclosure, you open up and you disclose something of yourself, not one of your ideas, but where, as we like to say, where you're coming from or who you fundamentally are, that more perspectival and participatory kind of knowing. And I respond, not just propositionally, but if I respond by also disclosing right, something about me, we get what's called mutually accelerating disclosure. When that happens, people experience love. Right? Not necessarily romantic. It could be friendship love. It can be familial love. It can be agapic love, where we're loving the person's selfhood and personhood. Um, um, but I think what's happening in love is, right, we're realizing our metaxu and we are looping through the world. We're opening up to the world and the world is opening up to us. That's what's happening in the parable of the cave. As the individual goes up, more light is coming in. It's changing his eyesight so he can go further and so forth. So I think that's how love is the way in which we actually put the metaxu into this reciprocal opening. And I think the reciprocal opening is one of our deepest um, procedural, and that's not quite right. It's one of our deepest senses. When we're in this process, it's one of our deepest senses that we're tracking the truth. And that's particularly the case if it's the central metaxu for Plato. I think Drew Hyland and others are right. I think third way Platonism's really been brilliant. But he argues that what all of Plato is we're between finitude and transcendence. And if we identify with either one of these poles, if we identify with finitude, we become servile and we're subject to tyranny. If we identify with their transcendence, we become hubristic and we become tyrants. But if we hold the two together, if we stay in the between and we loop with each other in the world, in love, then we will be tracking the truth. See, this is the fundamental difference between the Platonic model and the post-European Enlightenment modern model. We think of truth as something that is the result of a method, whereas I mean, and that's typified in Descartes' Descartes method. Leibniz's universal calculus, and Locke has his own method, etc. Whereas for Plato, there are truths that are only disclosed after we undergo significant transformation. So he has what you might call a maturational epistemology, something we do get. We understand that adults can understand the world much better than children. But for Plato, as the child is to the adult is the sage. We're not done when we become uh, adults. This is the whole thing about Socrates and the midwife. There's a lot of maturation and self transcendence we have to do in order to get to the place where we can loop with the world such that it will disclose some of its deeper truths to us. And this is a different kind of way of thinking about truth and knowing. Science is powerful. I'm a scientist, and of course, the scientific methods are very, very important. But this is the kind of knowing that is about how you are properly bound, religio, connected, and that sense of connectedness is your sense of meaning. How you're properly connected to the world, such that you become a wiser individual, not just one who possesses more theoretical propositions that are well evidenced.
What gets changed after the Cartesian revolution that starts with René Descartes' work?
Sorry, I shouldn't be laughing because we're just talking. I devote entire courses to this. I'm teaching one right now, both at the university and on my online platform. Well, a couple of least interlocking things. I've already said one. You get this replacement of transformation, dialogical transformation with monological method. I learn a method and I can just apply it on my own, and that's how I get knowledge. And in connection with that, the sense of what it is to know and what truth is changes fundamentally. In the Platonic world, truth is like confirmation. My mind and the world mutually shape each other so that they are in maximal contact, which you experience as that sort of like ongoing reciprocal opening. When I touch this, I'm being touched by it. That's a reciprocal opening process. That's why we use contact metaphors for our deepest connection to reality. Connection, are you in touch with things? Get a grip on reality, all that kind of stuff. Um, and what that means, therefore, is that my hand, notice what I had to do. My hand has to go through a lot of what might look from its perspective as deformation in order to optimize its receptivity and its capacity to interact. For Descartes, you get when you get the universal method, the monological method, knowledge becomes instead something else. Uh, Knowledge is uh, I have an internal mind, and that mind is in grip of the method. It's a computational method usually, and what it does is it represents the world, and so my knowledge is the coherence of my representations and their correspondence to reality. And then that's part. And why does Descartes do that? He does that because of what's happening in the scientific revolution, especially the work of Galileo and Copernicus and Kepler, where the math is getting us to reality. And so Galileo makes the big, he cuts the world in two. There's the external objective world that is mathematically measurable. And then there's the internal world of the mind, where all the non mathematically measurable properties, or what he called qualities, go. So meaning, beauty, truth. Truth is, yeah. What? How much does truth weigh? Like stuff like that. Um, and Descartes says, okay, we have to deal with this. Um, and so he pulls us into what Charles Taylor calls the buffered self. Now, there's a lot of other reasons why that's going on. Europe has just gone through the bloody religious wars, and there's a sense of people need to be, and now they distrust all their institutions, like all of them, like we do today, by the way. And so they feel very, very vulnerable and exposed. So this sense of a buffered self that is autonomous. This is the hallmark of modernity. I'm autonomous. I'm self-lawing. That's what autonomy means. I make the laws that govern me, right? That's what, and I'm inside myself. And what I do is I get stuff and I process it in here until I have certainty. So there's no chance that the world can get me. And then that's how I get knowledge. And what that's doing is it's cutting away all the contact, all the participation we were talking about, all the requirement for maturation. Um, and what it does is it does something really, really interesting. I'll just say this final point, and then I'll be quiet.
No,
You asked me, yeah. You said something. You asked me something really profound, I think. So one of the things the Enlightenment is doing, the European Enlightenment and the advent of modernity, is it's rejecting a fundamental vertical dichotomy. So dichotomy is not. This is Putnam. A dichotomy is not merely a distinction. It's a claim that reality is fundamentally divided and separated in this way. Not that we're just distinguishing things. So I can distinguish shape and size, but I can't ever get like a size that doesn't have a shape and a shape that doesn't have a size, right? So there's a difference between a dichotomy and a distinction. So the modernity basically rejects what had happened, long progression from the axial revolution, you know, reaching its peak in sort of Aquinas, where the world is divided vertically, dichotomously, into the supernatural and the natural. The natural can be understood by this time on its own terms, through reason, through science, right? And the supernatural works according to different principles, is probably made up of different stuff, and we can't access it through reason. And what is happening is, because of the scientific revolution and the religious wars, people are finding this view absurd in a really profound way. Not the great mass of people, but what you might call the intelligentsia, and the people who have the ear of of the aristocrats and the rulers. Um, and what they do paradoxically is they adopt naturalism which is no dualisms, no dualisms. It's all one world, all a hear the word, universe, not a cosmos, not a beautiful order anymore, but a universe in which we can apply our universal method. But, and this has been one of the main landing points for the postmodern critique of modernity, but they replaced that vertical horizontal with all of its problems, like how could God and the world possibly interact, with a bunch of horizontal dichotomies. We have the internal subjective world of mind and the external objective world of matter, and they operate according to two totally different kinds of principles. Which is then, how do mind and body interact? How am I a unified person? How am I in touch with the world? Where does meaning fit into this? And if meaning is subjective and truth depends on meaning, and you get all of these problems, and this, of course, is part of the critique of that postmodernity makes of modernity, is you replaced a vertical dichotomy with a bunch of horizontal ones, and we're not clear that this is any better. So, sorry, that's the fastest I can do it.
There are so many directions that we take from that beautiful explanation that you gave.
Thank you. That's kind.
Okay, let's take this one. You mentioned scientific revolution. I know you also talk a lot about meaning crisis.
Yeah.
Okay, if we talk about, so from the days of Copernicus, it seems like the significance of human beings in the greater scheme of things in the universe has been decreasing. And then we have this phenomenon of meaning crisis, and then also transformation from modernity to postmodernism. So how does these two variables interact? Because you can say, on the one hand, you can take nihilistic approach, but there is also other philosopher called Spinoza who
Yeah.
takes a
Yeah.
different approach and says,
Yeah.
universe, we are part of universe, and everything is in a structural order. So how does these variables interact?
Well, first of all, thank you for mentioning Spinoza. Um, he's the path not taken, to quote Frost. Um, yeah, I mean, I do think the scientific revolution. I think the dichotomizing. This is one of William Desmond's argument. It puts you in a weird place. We become, yes, you say we become objectively. I'll be more precise. We become ontologically insignificant. We're a little speck of matter that has no causal power in a vast universe. And then we become epistemological gods. We are that because we are autonomous. We are that from which all of history and value and meaning. And when you and then just pause for a moment, because we just run that grammar without realizing, wait, how can we have all this epistemological godhood and all this ontological insignificance together? That doesn't work. It's like our ontology has no bearing on our what we can know, and how we know has no bearing on our ontology. Um, yeah, and that replaces an older view, the view of participation, which is that human beings are a microcosm of the macrocosm. It's not that we're large. The ancients were already convinced the cosmos was big and God is much bigger and all that sort of thing. It's that the patterns and principles and processes that are the grammar of reality are the same as us. That's how we can participate in reality. That's been lost, and we with this dichotomy of ontological insignificance and epistemological godhood, we are deeply torn asunder, because now we have tremendous. Think about this. Think about it very carefully. You're placing tremendous responsibility on people while simultaneously telling them they have no power to undertake that responsibility. Right? You're responsible for all the history and meaning and value because you're an autonomous monological method user, right? And it's like, but I can't I don't, the amount of impact I have on the world is insignificant. And so that tends to lead to a kind of blind spot. This is my friend Evan Thompson's term. They use it in the book, The Blind Spot. Glasser. What is it? I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the names. I know Evan's a friend of mine, so I remember his name. And this is the idea that we create a scientific worldview that can explain, we think, everything except the existence of science and the scientists doing the science. Um, for example, let's put together, let's see the tension in this epistemological thing, the blind spot. So you have a scientist, and a lot of them do this, right? Saying all that's real is the bottom level, the quantum. Now, notice because I'm a scientist, there's the epistemological godhood, and they're making a pronouncement on reality, but then but if all that's real is that level, where are you? And where's science? Science isn't happening at the quantum level. I have to measure things. I have to do mathematics. I have to argue with people. Like, where are the scientists in the science? They're not real. They're illusion. They're way up here in your scheme, right? And they're largely illusory. How are they pronouncing on the ultimate truths of reality? Like, if I'm in the middle of a dream and I'm making all these pronouncements, you would doubt that I had any reason. You wouldn't have any reason for believing that I'm saying the truth. Um, and then you get, well, why are you telling me this? Well, because, like, what? Well, because it's true. You value the truth. Yes, yes, but I thought you thought values were only subjective. Like, if they're subjective, why should I value the truth? Well, truth isn't subjective. Why not? And it goes round and round and round, and you basically get, the William Desmond says, you have a valueless universe and we're projecting our value on it, but we're told that such projection is an illusion and that we're ultimately ontologically insignificant. That's just a recipe for nihilism. Um, and what people don't get about nihilism, it's not just sort of a French intellectual thing where you ennui. Nihilism destroys science as much as it destroys anything else. Like, people don't understand that. Science leads to nihilism, but to a nihilism that undermines science and the scientists and their pursuit of the truth and their regarding of the truth as something that has an intrinsic value and has an existence beyond their subjectivity. So that is the problem, that you get this. And so, and what's really funny is you get, because of the progress of science, you get a biologist and atheist like Richard Dawkins saying the cell is a model of its environment, or Carl Friston of predictive processing. Um, you don't have a model of the world; you are a model of the world. They're bringing, here are two, like, they're bringing back the microcosm macrocosm relationship, and it's like, and so
there seems to be a conflict here when we treat science as something sacred that leads us to truth, but at the same time science indicating that we might be insignificant in the grand scheme of things, and then so that's the conflict that we are having.
Well, it's that the scientists, in order to have their epistemological view from nowhere. Well, what in the past, what was the being? The view from nowhere is actually the view of everything, everywhere, all at once. Who has that? That was God. So this is what I mean. The scientist has to stand in this godlike place. Well, he will then say, "I'm actually inside." Right, the universe is this tall, tiny, little, insignificant thing. And that view from nowhere, I mean, Gödel, it's impossible. You can't have a formal system that is simultaneously complete and consistent. Heisenberg, I can't possibly measure everything, because as I'm measuring one, measurements are in trade-off relationships. I lose some information as I measure other. Einstein, I can't get the simultaneity. There is no absolute space and time. Like, that view has been destroyed by science, and yet the scientists, because of the weird divide between epistemology and ontology, pretends that they're standing there while explicitly claiming that they're not. And this is this is the blind spot. It's like, no, no, no. We need an ontology and an epistemology that properly place scientists and science within their ontology.
So, yeah, you mentioned earlier also this we becoming gods. And I can't help but insert Nietzsche here,
Of
and
course.
his famous declaration in the Gay Science saying that God is dead.
Yeah.
So is this the same nihilism that Nietzsche is worried about?
I think. I mean, I regard Nietzsche as one of the prophets of the meaning crisis. He realizes that, and the language he uses is very important. God is dead, And a lot of people don't realize that when the madman runs into the marketplace to scream this, he's not talking to believers, he's talking to atheists, which is
Yeah.
like, and he keeps telling them, you don't realize what you've done. And I think he's pointing to exactly this issue, the blind spot. You don't realize what you've done. You don't realize that your atheism is actually a nihilism that will undermine all of your morality and your science, right? Um, I and I, you know, and I find that, sorry, that passage always haunts me. You know, how you know how did we took a sponge and we wiped out the sky and we unchained ourselves and we are forever falling. Like he's trying to get this sense of profound cosmic domicide. We are unhomed. The thing that I think is still problematic about Nietzsche is he's still within modernity. He's still holding on to the autonomous. He hates Kant. He hates Kant. He makes that apparently clear, but he still holds to the autonomous self, like the buffered self. I need to overcome myself. The Ubermensch, um, because I think again, I have tremendous respect for him, even though I disagree with him. He sees that without transcendence, our ability to be in touch with reality, he calls it being true to the earth. Listen to that language. That's really pertinent language.
Is it Kant saying that?
No, that Nietzsche said that
Okay, yeah.
we need to be true to the earth. Nietzsche's realizing that the self overcoming, the self transcendence, that we need a kind of transformation to be true to the earth, to recover our contact with our bodies and with reality, to get out of the two worlds mythology. And he rightly saw also that we had just replaced the vertical two worlds ontology with our own two world ontology that was just now. Like I said, he's still caught up in the autonomous individual self. That has a lot to do with how he was forced to live by his illness, I think. It has a lot to do with he's still in a particular time. He's in Europe. Europe is still in in ascendance, all that sort of stuff. Um, but I think that's very much what Nietzsche's talking about. When Nietzsche says God is dead, he doesn't mean that we've stopped believing in a particular figure. He means that our ability to have a sense of a resonant and reciprocally opening relationship with reality that we find sacred has been killed. And that is the meaning crisis.
So the God is dead is not a celebration, but a warning. But if
Yeah.
we think about, okay,
That's why he goes into the churches and sings, right? He says all the churches are now mausoleums and we have to properly grieve, right?
if we jump back to the present day from 19th century where Nietzsche lived to the 21st century, let's say Nietzsche is resurrected for what via whatever technology, and he checks the news, opens the whatever social media, and do you think he would tell us, you humans, you haven't learned anything from what I shared with you? Or, yeah, what would be his reaction to the modern world, modern meaning crisis that we
I
experience?
think he would be profoundly disappointed. He thought of himself as a prophet. The lightning is seen way before it's heard, and I think he felt ahead of his time. I think he would be disappointed to see that many of the things, like when he talks about the last man and things like that, many of the things that he worried about have come into a kind of ascension. They're like they are prominent and powerful. So Nietzsche is very hesitant around the rise of totalitarian regimes, um, and the I mean, contrary to what his sister did, Nietzsche was. I'm not. Nietzsche has lots of kind of vile attitudes, especially towards women and other things like that. But I don't think he would have. I think he would have been harshly critical of both Nazism and communism. Um, and
But would
then
find it natural that these ideologies emerged in the lack of a shared belief system.
Well, yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think both Nazism and communism arise when they do and how they do, because they are pseudo-religious ideologies. They are trying to make political allegiance and governance do all the work that religion used to do for us. They're trying to. Nazism and communism are responses to the meaning crisis, and then of course we now have um, a take on. There's a book I've got. I haven't started reading it yet, called The Enchantment of Mammon. For many people, they don't realize that their religion is capitalism. Um, I, I've just criticized Marxism and Nazism, so you know I'm not some cryptic Nazi or communist about any of this. But people talk about this weird entity, the economy. They talk about it as if, yeah. And there are the court astrologers, the economists. Do they make predictions? Not really. Right? And the economy has a sun. It's called the market. And the market puts us in touch with the economy. And if we participate correctly in the market, then the economy will bless us with the one blessing we want, which is growth for its own sake and prosperity. And there's a spirit of the economy and the market that moves through us. It's this abstract thing that flows between us all. It's called money. And people don't realize, like, step back and think about that, like what's going on, and then how you are devoting your time and your attention and your energy to, right, to a way of life that is trying to fit into capitalism as best it can. um, Nietzsche would look at all of this and go, what happened, where's the Ubermensch?
Well, I'm afraid he might see AI or super intelligence as a possible candidates for that.
Well, I would disagree with you about that. I mean, I think I would hope it would be a very friendly disagreement. I think he would say that. I mean, one of the defining features of the LLMs. I'm not speaking about all possible future AGI. One of the defining features of LLMs is they don't care. They do not care. They fundamentally, ontologically, epistemologically do not care. And for Nietzsche, this would be for him, they would be ghouls, to my mind. They would be ghosts. They would be parasites. They would be decadent. And that's one of the things. For him, he would see them as the I would argue, as an ultimate kind of decadence of our humanity, rather than as the Ubermensch. The Ubermensch, I mean, he pronounced a couple people as examples of the Ubermensch, and the person he pronounced was Goethe. And it's that combination of art and philosophy and science that you find in Goethe. That's what he was looking for in the Ubermensch.
I hope you're finding this conversation interesting, and if so, please subscribe or follow on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Please also leave a like on YouTube or a review on Spotify, as this helps the show reach more people. You can also leave comments if you have any personal thoughts on the topics discussed during the episode. Now back to the conversation. If we try to understand our reasons for engaging in philosophy and science, this might be very oversimplification based on my limited knowledge, but we can see philosophy as something, or philosophy plus science as a tool that we use to discover reality, truth, or something that we use to help us guide action in real life.
Mm-hmm.
So, is it the case that we have been moving towards a second camp with the modernity, and that's why we have Marxism, communism, Nazism?
Well, I mean, one of the things we've done, right, with the age of method, is we've tried to find the method by which we will make utopia. So we will realize the sacred because we have the method that is guaranteed. If we run it, it's like a computer program. That's the best way to think about it. If we get the right computer program and commit to running, no matter what it has to consume, we will get to utopia, and the ends justifies the means. And so, yeah, I think that philosophy is there's two meanings of this, and Pierre Hadot has been very helpful around this. There's a common there's the not the common the current academic meaning of philosophy, and I have a PhD in that kind of philosophy, so I'm not here to like to pee on that or anything like that. But that's mostly about conceptual analysis, reflection, maybe phenomenological reflection, a lot of very powerful tools. Then there's the ancient philosophia, which is philosophy as a way of life, where what you're doing is what we were talking about earlier. You're trying to train virtues, and virtues involve a dynamical integration of belief and skill, perspective and identity. such and in community with others and in communion with the world. This is the ancient model. And the idea there isn't so much what we might today call knowledge. It's more, uh, it's more about wisdom, which is living with virtuosity and virtue with respect to other people and reality. And since we have replaced that with a kind of monarchical and uh, at times maniacal idea of method, like if we just do X, Y, Z, we'll get the perfect world. We have basically sacrificed our contact with those institutions and ways of life and role models for giving us wisdom. Another way of understanding the meaning crisis is a wisdom famine. We don't know where to go. We don't have traditions and monasteries and institutions and role models that we can imitate and internalize and indwell and belong to, and a tradition in which we've had multiple generations trying out experimentations on ways of life. That is all outside of us. Um, I mean, I know some monks, and they exist, but they're not important the way they used to be. And
When
so,
you mention wisdom famine, I think that's a very it's a
yes,
great category. Okay, would one of the remedies to wisdom famine would be that bringing back that lost understanding of philosophy as a way of life?
definitely. And I think that, and realizing that there are other kinds of knowing beyond propositional computational knowing, that there's procedural knowing of our skills, there's perspectival knowing of knowing what it is like, and there is participatory knowing by belonging, right, and being mutually shaped, indwelling and being indwelt by something. The way I know my beloved partner, for example. Um, so yeah, the ways of life, ecologies of practices, many different kinds of practices for shaping belief, for shaping skill, for shaping perspectives, for shaping identities. This can often involve altered states of consciousness, mystical experience, deep dialogical transformation. Um, all of this has been lost, and we're not going to find in our current world, the marketplace, we'll find a smorgasbord of ideas and propositions. We'll find advertising. I mean, there are people out there, I know them, that are communities are springing up trying to address this wisdom famine, but by and large, they are marginalized, they are trivialized, they are dismissed by the powers that be and the structures that are. But if we wanted to address the wisdom famine, sorry, this is a long answer. Yes, that's what we need to do.
So you could ask a question and say, where do you go for information? Where do you go for
Yeah, I've done this. Yeah,
yeah, I've seen you speak about this in the classroom. If you say, "Okay, I will go," where do you want to go for information? Okay, Google,
yeah,
maybe ChatGPT or whatever. But where do you go
yeah,
for wisdom?
yeah,
Silence.
yeah. Exactly, exactly. I'll occasionally get an answer for people that two things, two kinds of answers, and they're both important. Some people will say they'll say, well, they'll give a religious answer, and then other people will talk about a beloved family member that is a role model for them, and that they look up to. And those two things are actually interrelated in some very powerful ways. I mean, it's no coincidence, this is Eberstadt's thing on how the West really lost God, that the most secular countries are also the countries where people live uh, most individually, isolated, alone. Um, so they do not, right? All they're doing is consuming propositions and pictures. They're not doing this kind of stuff we're talking about, looking up to people, right? Committing to transformation, maturation, etc.
Perhaps one of the contributing factors is also how cheap the information is these days, where you can get
Oh,
anything.
yeah. Yep. And so what that Sloman's did a lot of work on. Sloman did a lot of work on the knowledge illusion. People confuse, I should say, people confuse access to information with understanding the information.
Mm.
So the classic experiment. Uh, you know what bicycles are? Yeah, yeah. You know how they work? Of course they do. Well, draw a diagram that will actually explain how a bicycle works, and they can't do it. They confuse familiarity and easy access with understanding the information. And so this makes the thing that Socrates was worried about much worse. Things are super salient, super easily, right, I don't know what to say, consumable by us, way ahead of our attempts to understand. Like imagine if somebody said, I don't want to ride a bike until I really understand how it works. I won't use the internet or my smartphone unless I really understand how it works. And how it works isn't just the mechanics of it. How it works is also, how does it plug into my psychology and my perception and my memory and my attention?
Do you think this is because since we got rid of God in the 19th century, that we know how we have an understanding that we can understand these things. We have the power of the God, basically.
Yeah, I think that's right. And but what most people don't realize is, I think you're right. They take the monarchical attitude of modernity. Well, it's science and technology, but they typically don't have the scientific or the technological background, and so this object is a religious object for people. It glows, it shines, it speaks to them, it tells them what they should do, it gives them access to information. They'll devote time to it just to worship it. What do you mean by worship it? I mean, you're just looking at it. It's not doing anything. You're not doing anything. You're just being with it and giving it your attention, which is of course being used against you. If something is free or easy, you're the product. Um, so yeah, I think many people, um, and we know, the attitude towards this is religious, because if you separate people from their phone, they have profound existential anxiety. Like really, they get creeped out in an important way.
So the need for worshiping never disappeared, but what we worship has changed.
That's what I meant when I said at the very beginning, when Socrates said, "What do you love?" Which doesn't
Oh,
mean
I
what do you have
see. Oh
romantic
my God.
feelings for, right? Yes, exactly.
That's a great callback to the earlier,
Yeah.
this discussion that we had. No, I've been reading recently Aristotle's Politics a lot recently, and
Wow.
I think what is related. So, thing that you mentioned, philosophy as a way of life, as one of the remedies for the wisdom famine. I think even there, towards the end of the politics, he makes this theory that okay, education is for leisure. When you are free,
Yeah.
education is how to prepare you for leisure. But if
Yeah.
you look at today, if you say that to a common person, maybe they will be surprised. "Oh, I want to get education because I want a good job, better
Yep.
career."
Yeah. So we've lost the idea. Now, I want to be really careful. So I support your point. I'm not criticizing that. I just want to qualify it. I mean, don't preach the gospel to somebody that needs a coat. Like there are people that are suffering, they're destitutes. We don't want to speak from a position of socioeconomic privilege. And we have to remember that Aristotle is privileged that way. So let's take that all into account. Nevertheless, is there a way in which that point can still be relevant, can still challenge us in a critical and good fashion? I think there is, which is, we think of time away from work as how we repair ourselves to get so we can go back to work. This is a
Mm.
point that Hartmut Rosa makes and Fromm makes and other people make. And it's like, work is right. Work is a mixed thing because people also have some of their most important relationships there. So it's a mixed bag. But let's say generally what you're doing is you're trying to meet what we often call the necessities of life. There are things we have to have. We have to have food and shelter and medicine and water. And in order to have those, we have to have money. We have to have a certain amount of political status. And so we have to have those things. Um, and that's work. Work is when we are right. Like you can always tell what work is by asking yourself the following question: if I could get a shortcut and get to the goal, would I take the shortcut? So, for example, I hope this is not controversial. If uh, if my beloved spouse, who's a dentist, said, "Hey, we figured out you don't have to brush your teeth anymore. You just take this pill," I'll go, "Yep, there we go. I don't have to brush my. I want the clean teeth, right?" So work is when you're everything, it's instrumental and you need to control and consume, and this is important. However, you also have needs that are not needs that are met by having things. They are needs that are met by becoming. These are your profound maturational needs. These are the needs to become more mature, which means to face reality. Even the metaphor is even better, to face up to reality. These are the right, to be more honest, to be wiser, to be more courageous, more virtuous, etc. And those are not those different. You're not consuming and manipulating. You're participating in something beyond you that can transform you. That's what leisure was. Leisure was the time where you don't work, you play. Play isn't frivolous. Play is, if I offer you a shortcut, you don't want it. And it doesn't mean just because it's fun, it's because it might be very meaningful. Right? So the point of leisure is to allow me to do the serious play. Think about a musician playing a really difficult but beautiful piece of music by Beethoven. They're playing music, but we don't think, oh, that's just frivolous and they're just doing it for fun. No, there's tremendous meaning there, right? And if you can say, well, I don't want that, I'll just get a chat GPT to print out some music for me. Like, no, no, no. I want to participate in how it matures me, makes me grow up. Another important metaphor. And so leisure is the space wherein we can do the serious play that will allow us to meet our being needs, because you
Mm-hmm.
can't get that from the having mode. In fact, one of the things our culture does, according to Fromm, is it cons us into believing that our maturational needs can be met by having. I need to be more mature. I need to be an adult male. Have a car. Oh, well, I need to be in love. Have lots of sex, right? And I need to transform myself. Have some alcohol. Have a
So
drug.
yeah, I think that's a very good explanation, because the way I think about it is that, yeah, do we know how to be in a playful leisure? Because there is a possibility that in the near future, with all the technological revolution that we are having, we may need to replace some jobs may disappear. This may
Yeah.
result in unemployment. And the question is, are we ready for that possibility? Where do we know how to be at playful leisure when we don't have anything to do?
So, so excellent question, and I'm putting a lot of thought into this. I think religion. I think religion is a very intricate ecology of practices that allow us to seriously play with each other and with the world, and with our consciousness and our cognition and our conscience. And that and but religion is typically not fun. And so what happens? So let me give you two contrasting things that I've done. So I've been on the I was on the first major leg, the biggest leg of the philosophical Silk Road. Now that's properly a pilgrimage. Many people don't know this. Our word theory comes from a Greek word theoria, and theoria meant how to look at things. But the actual, this is Ward Nightingale, the oldest meaning of theoria is pilgrimage. Remember, we talked about like the circumambulation. You have to like journey through other perspectives and other places and other people. That's pilgrimage, right? And pilgrimage isn't fun. Pilgrimage is it's painful. It's scary. I got sick, all that kind of stuff. I'm so glad I did it. Compare that to when Sarah and I recently went to Cancun, right? And you're on the beach, and then that's tourism. And tourism is, right? I want to be as self indulgent as I can. Now, the thing is, you need that sometimes. Sometimes you have to rest and recuperate, and you have to just, okay, just take care of me, right? The thing is, I, sorry, this will sound self promotional, and I ask you if you need to criticize me. Um, I can't do tourism for more than about 5 days, right? I pilgrimaged for 6 weeks because the thing is, think about COVID. When all you're doing is self indulgence, like you're not you're glutting your attentional space, your free time, your leisure in a way that forecloses on you meeting any of your maturational being needs, right? um And I think we have a profound drive in us. And I do think that we have to recover things like the demanding ecologies of practice in which we do serious play and put those ecologies under a stress test by going on pilgrimage if we want to recover what it is to engage in leisure as opposed to just self-indulgent tourism. We're becoming tourists. We either are laborers or tourists. I'm not a tourist. We sit in front of the screens and we're just being tourists, right? Now, sometimes you're watching a work of art, and then that's different. Work of art is a pilgrimage, but most of it is entertaining. Entertainment, when you entertain an idea, you're just holding it in your head to look at it. You're like you're not being vulnerable before it. You're not allowing it to challenge you. So yeah, I do think that if we don't recover what the religions and pilgrimage, which is almost always a religious practice, did for us, we will get into worse and worse forms of modal confusion. Thinking by having pleasure, we are meeting our meat, and we will. That's a profound self-destructive form of self-deception.
I have this exercise, like self exercise, when I question myself. For example, okay, let's say uh, I want to, this is my life goal. I want to travel the world. Okay, that's what
Yeah.
I'm going to do. But okay, then the question is, let's imagine you have traveled every single country in the world. Then what's next?
Yep.
I want to play all the great video games that are out there for my life. Okay, let's say
Yeah.
you have played every single one of them. Then what's next? And I see this as a test for understanding where is your ultimate end. And
Yes.
yeah,
Ultimate concern, Tillich would say. A bit of a spoiler here, but that's what the Good Place is. Excellent, one of the best, popular philosophical shows. I guess it was originally a TV show, right? Because they come to that. There's a chapter in Julian Barnes' book, the History of the World in 10.5 chapters, where a guy goes to heaven. And he does all of this stuff, and like he does exactly what you do, and then he's done. He sort of comes and he says, "I'm sort of done." And then St. Peter says, "Good. The point of heaven is not to live forever; it's to get to a place where you're ready to die, to cease to be." Um, I pray every day, and I mean that seriously, that I live so deeply that I do not want to live forever.
mm,
I think the quest for perpetual youth and immortality is one of the greatest cons uh, that we have. First of all, you're not going to succeed. And secondly, it is the thing that is cutting you off because it's a unhealthy surrogate for contact with eternity. Eternity isn't everlastingness. It's the deepest ultimate reality that you should ultimately care about. Um, and so yeah, I think your practice is a good practice. It's a Stoic practice, which puts it in good stead in my mind, and it's also a Buddhist practice. Buddhists have a practice which I've done for many times, in which you actually try to say, "Okay, now I'm immortal. I am literally immortal." And you do all the things you just did, and you run through everything, and then you realize that's going to exhaust and your friends are all dying and your family's all, oh well, then they have to be immortal, right? And then it just bleeds out, and the whole universe has to freeze in place while you do all this self-gratification stuff that really times out like in about 10 years max. And then you have absolute horror because there's nothing to do and nothing is changing, and you're with people and thousands of years are going by, and you feel the horror. So you're in good company. There's these practices that try to wake us up to what is super salient to you, and does it give you deep understanding? Does it take you to the depths of what is most real and eternal? If not, put it in proportion. You need to do things. We need to drink. We need to eat. We need shelter. I'm not saying that. I'm not stupid. But the idea is, okay, Socrates would do this. He would walk into the marketplace and say, "Look at all the things I don't need." Or he'd come to people and say, "How much time did you spend in your hair today?" They go, "Oh, 20, 25 minutes, half an hour." "How much time did you spend on your soul?" And
Or
it's
maybe
about yeah,
Diogenes will also come to the conversation. He would.
yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. He's going to do a conversation stopper of some kind. Performance art before there was performance art.
Okay, that was a great like pivot to like mentioning all those philosophers and the ways of thinking. Okay, another question I have is okay, meaning of life.
Yep.
Is it meaningful to ask a question about what is the meaning of life?
Okay, so you have to be really careful. And I mean, I've been doing a lot of self correction about this because um, I usually don't just take up a psychological construct like wisdom or mindfulness. I criticize it and do theoretical criticism and propose reformulations. But I just took up the meaning in life construct. So psychologists, and now I'm correcting that. I think there's problems. Arjun Arora and I published a video essay on this. So I think psychologists did something interesting, and there's a point to it, and then there's a point that's lost. There's a baby that was thrown out with the bathwater. So they made a distinction between meaning of life, which is a metaphysical claim that there's a structure to the cosmos that has ordained or destined what you should be doing, and your job is to find that. And that's very anti-modern. We like no autonomous self. Meaning in life is no. What is it that let's agree that our lives are filled with frustrations and failures and effing up a lot and hurting people we don't want to hurt and being hurt by people in a way that we regard as unfair, unjust. Um, Life and life it can also just be randomly violent. All of this. The proposal of meaning in life is, what is it in your life that sustains you, that gives you existential resilience in that? So, for example, your meaning in life things would have been, what happened? What did you fall back on in COVID to not go insane, right? And for many people, they went, because a lot of people have now reported this and we got evidence of it, they kind of went insane because they didn't have much to fall back on. Uh, so their meaning in life, it's again, Socrates, what do you love? Well, that means that your work and other things, that's where you're getting your meaning in life from. And so psychologists made this distinction, and I think that's a valuable distinction. But I think it's right. But it's a dichotomy from modernity, right? It's no supernatural meaning of life. There's only the autonomous self. The problem with that, in a nutshell, I mean, please watch the video essay because it's a long
Sure.
argument. But is that it's the idea that meaning is a personal possession of preference. I am responsible for my meaning. But that's what we're back to. I project my values
Mm.
onto reality. And that's nihilism. It ultimately gives you a worldview that undercuts you. Like, well, why are you projecting those values? Right. And it's an illusion. And why should an illusion matter to you? Uh, it looks like, in fact, that part of what is integral to meaning in life is that you're connected to something that's larger than yourself. Now, that doesn't mean physically bigger, it means more real. That's why we have these metaphors of waking up. I'm in a little dream world and I wake up to the wider world, and that's intrinsically good because now I'm more in touch with reality. Or I'm in a dark room and I turn on the light, and now much more of the world, I have a bigger perspective from which I could see the mistakes I was making in the dark. The meaning in life is bound up with properly being oriented to genuinely realizing what's real, because it's bound up with maturation. It's bound up with belonging, with fitting in. And to fit in, there has to be you have to acknowledge and shape yourself to an existing structure, right? And meaning has to be shareable. This was Wittgenstein and Heidegger, on and on. The two greatest philosophers of the 20th century is that meaning is not a private personal possession of preference. It is something inherently between us. It is communally created in communion. It's, language games and within forms of life, or aletheia, and language is the shepherd of being. What these two great philosophers are trying to tell us is that meaning, even linguistic meaning, is inherently shareable and mutually correctable. This was Hegel's criticism of Kant. Meaning we have to be able to mutually correct each other, or we don't have meaning. So it has to be shareable. It has to be correctable. It has to be challenging us to shape ourselves, to belong to fit into, to be more deeply in touch with a reality that is beyond our preferences and our biases and our egocentrism. Just like we expect the person who is growing up to be less egocentric, more reality centric than the child, right? We criticize when we're saying somebody's immature, we're almost always saying you're being egocentric, you're being selfish, you're being biased by your own perspective, right? That meaning is bound up with all of that. So I reject both. I reject, right? I, I reject sort of the older model of meaning of life. I don't think we are destined. But I also reject the modern, you make your own meaning. No, that's not how meaning works. So, although I still use meaning in life, but Arjun and I think we think we're going to change the name. We think we're going to talk about aspirational meaning.
So when you mentioned earlier about the real connection to the real,
Yep.
yeah.
So there's a powerful way of doing this. Ask people, are you in a satisfying romantic relationship? Very satisfying. It's making you happy. And this is important because romantic relationships take the role of God, religion, culture, the church for us. There's the one. It's a Neoplatonic term for ultimate reality. The one who's going to make me and that's why relationships can't bear that burden, and that's why they break so much, and that's why they're the greatest sources of suffering in a lot of people's lives. But if you ask people, okay, are you in a great relationship? Yes. How many of you who are in a great relationship would want to know that your partner is cheating on you, even if that meant the complete destruction of the relationship? And 95% put up their hands. And when you ask them why, they say, well, because it wouldn't be real. That's the answer they give, right? This is Plato's great insight. We have two meta desires. Whatever satisfies our desires, we want what satisfies our desire to be real, not fake, not inauthentic, not deceptive, not a lie. And we want whatever satisfies us to integrate us, to give us an inner peace, a fullness of being.
So that real is real as long as it plays that function of filling that gap.
And I would ask you, in the end, I mean, I'm doing a lot of work on this with Dan Chiappi and other people. What is our sense of realness? Because in the end, we have to rely on it. This is the problem with the method. The method requires something that is not in the method, which is, how do I know? Like, what's the sense? Well, the method tells you. Okay, then how do I know the method is real? Right? And what you keep backing into is that there's a sense of realness, a process that is like a fundamental presupposition we have, and I can't give you an argument for it, because any argument would require that you already abide by it, right? It has to do with something of, I'm realizing as I'm being look, there's a kind of ontonormativity, not moral or aesthetic goodness to this, because there's a way in which it's for itself, and that continually liberates me from being able to completely suck it into my subjectivity, subsume it. Because if I could suck everything in, I would have a solipsistic nightmare, and I'd be profound in utter cosmic loneliness. But it's also not, right? It's not absurd. I can participate in it. So there's a way in which it's for itself, but also for me. Because if it was just for itself, I'm doomed. It's absurd. The world makes no sense. It's a chaotic horror, and so it's for me to the extent that I'm free from that. But it's not just for me, because if it was just for me, then I'd fall into a solipsistic nightmare. See, this is a fundamental goodness of being. While we're realizing anything, we're being realized by it. That sense.
All good.
That sense, right? It's like Piaget. We're trying to find the balance between what we can assimilate and what forces us to accommodate. That sweet spot. Rosa, resonance. Resonance is when we feel deeply connected to something, but there's an uncontrollable aspect to it, like the beautiful sunrise or the beautiful snowfall, or somebody's just said something unexpectedly wonderful. Like those moments of resonance, because they're on that spot, they're on that sweet spot between assimilation and accommodation, between realizing and being realized, between participating in how things are for themselves and for us, and like this, and then you can say, but that could all be an illusion. And I say, what would you use to know it was an illusion other than that? Like, all you rely on is its capacity for self-correction. And if you say, but logically it could all be an illusion, yes, then you are trapped in an absolute solipsism, an absolute skepticism that lasts no more than the specious present of a few seconds in which you can hold things in your self-awareness. And you can't live that way. You can't live that way.
Yeah, that's a fascinating distinction that you made, and also disadvantages associated with those two meaning in life. So I have this understanding. I'm curious, what do you think about this? I saw this
Please.
somewhere in the past and stuck in my mind. So okay, the question, what is the meaning of life? I wonder whether if we are able to give an answer to that question, the question itself collapses. In the same way, when you ask a question, why do you love me? If you can
Yes.
give a rational, objective answer, then the question, like the meaning of the question disappears.
Exactly, because the meaning, and the meaning isn't like, if you could give an answer, you're either pointing to something just objective in the person or some subjective thing in you that has nothing to do with them. But the love is actually metaxu. It's a binding, it's religio. It's like adaptivity. Adaptivity isn't in the organism and in the environment. It's how they fit together, how they belong together. This is all the work I do on relevance realization. It's the same thing. The meaning isn't, it's not out there and it's not in here. It's between. It's between. The world and you are co-creating that meaning. And when that happens well, when you're getting the best of them correcting each other and saving you from solipsism and from absurdism, you are happy. You feel meaning. You feel really connected to something real that is realizing you, helping to actualize and mature you.
That's interesting. Would that be would if we take that discussion, and then would this be a reasonable conclusion that science, rationality, empiricism is not enough? We need something to fill that gap, because if you look at it very objectively, that okay, love, meaning of
Yeah.
life, if you can answer those questions scientifically, yeah, those they lose their meaning.
Because they blind spot you. The scientist has to love the truth to tell you that love is an illusion. What the hell is going on there? That's a performative contradiction. And I agree with Whitehead and with Socrates. Like, there's propositional contradiction. That's when this x is a square and x is not square. Like, performative contradiction is where there's a contradiction between the statement and the state I'm making it from. Here's a non-controversial one. I'm completely unconscious right now. No, I have to be conscious to make statements. And so if the scientists, because they love the truth, are saying to you love is an illusion, they're in a performative contradiction. They're right. The place from which they're making the statement isn't coherent with the statement that is being made. Yes, but I would put it to you that think about this. We have these two words, and we often treat them as synonymous, but they're not. We talk about rational, we talk about reasonable. Okay. So rational typically means, like, you've got a good argument and good evidence, and you are motivated by that. Um, that's the computational model given to us modernity. Now, there's an older model of rationality that goes back to Socrates. Was no Socrates. It's not about being able to marshal arguments or evidence. You need to do that. That's necessary, but it's not sufficient. You also have to be doing something else. You have to be checking what your orientation is, what your connection is, what your identity is. You have to be constantly looking for self-deception, which is very, very different from just making an argument. Um, being really so we have research that shows this, like, being really, really good at giving moral arguments doesn't predict you being a moral person. Right? Okay. Now, what do we mean by the reasonable person? So when you, if I were to get charged for criminal negligence, I'm being held to the standard of the reasonable person. They're not saying well, you should have run an argument and evidence. It's like, no, no, no. There was a little girl there and you could have saved her without putting yourself in danger, and you chose not to. You're not caring. Remember Socrates? You're not caring about the right things in the right way. You're not oriented to reality. You're not connected to reality. You're not committed, right, to the intrinsic value of personhood. This is you're an unreasonable person. And Kant actually discovers this in the Critique. This is work that Dan Chiappian are doing. He realizes that he can give, here's my left hand and my right hand, using just propositions without using synonyms for left and right? Like to the left of my nose or something like, right? There's no way propositionally of distinguishing my right hand from my left hand. Everything I can say about my right hand applies equally to my left and vice versa. And then he realizes, but it's different. There's a difference, a non-propositional difference of orienting this way and orienting that way, and what it's like to orient this way rather than that way. And then he realizes before you can reason in the sense of running an argument, you have to be properly oriented. And then he freaks out because it's like, but that's not a conceptual propositional thing. He says it's a feeling, which is like a garbage can category for Kant. He doesn't know what to do with this. The ancient world knew what to do with this. This is eros. This is the desire to be one with things. It doesn't just mean having sex. Eros is the desire to indwell things and to be indwelt by them. It's to reciprocally open. It's to love them in the way we've been talking. It is to love reality in a way that is as powerful as the way you say you love your child or you love your spouse. That's reason, and it's not the same thing as what we now call computational rationality.
So
And I think, go ahead.
love is becoming one with it, participating in the
That's
thinginess
right.
that you mentioned, thinginess.
That's right. And that right that I mean, this is Harry Frankfurt, Reasons for Love. That's what constrains us. He gives this wonderful, let me give you a version of his example. So I'm in my studio right now. It's in an apartment. I used to live here. I don't live here anymore. And my son Jason used to live with me, right? Because I was helping him through through undergrad and through teachers college and finding a job and supporting him that way and all that sort of stuff. Now, this is Frankfurt's example. I could form the proposition, I should kick Jason out. I will have way more food in my, right? Way quiet. I'll be able to walk on the floor without there being crap all over the place. I won't have to deal with all these negative moods for somebody that's going through this educational process. And I can form the pictures, I can run the propositions, and I can calculate the argument. But what I can't do is orient to it, where I actually make this my, as James would say, a viable perspective. So I hold myself back from ever participating in that. It's unthinkable to me in this sense. That's what Frankfurt says, and that's because I love. And but you go, okay, well, but that's Spinoza. You have to love reality. The intellectual love of God is, can you love reality so that a lot of self-deceptive behavior becomes unthinkable to you in the same way that kicking out Jason is unthinkable to me? That's Spinoza, that deep eros, that deep intellectual love of God is what we most profoundly need to be rational. If there's any philosopher that's a rationalist and right in as logical a possible manner as he can, is Spinoza. But he gets that all of that's in service of the intellectual love of God. And intellectual doesn't mean what we mean by it. Intellectual means noetic. It means that perspectival, participatory noesis and gnosis that Plato talked about. That's what that Spinoza means by intellectus. He means this non-propositional knowing.
Love reality to such extent that even if there is a tragedy or something that you haven't planned that happened, you still accept it as a necessary or byproduct of this process, let's say.
There's definitely that, but there's also, and that's important. Yes. But in conjunction with that, it's also, I love reality so much that really salient appearances can't tempt me. And before you think that's an unreasonable thing to say, again, think about the child versus the adult. when Spencer was my other son, when he was a young child, he had a toy tower with all these Marvel and DC figures in it, and he wanted to play. He wanted to, like children will, like they'll hold off on urinating because of play, because as I said earlier, play is the main developmental engine. And I basically have to force him, I mean, in a virtuous, loving way, to stop playing and go to the bathroom or come and eat or go to bed, right? And there's that struggle. Now, when I came into the home and the toy tower was there, it's not like no, no, I will not play with those very salient. I like those universes, DC and Marvel. I'd like to watch the animated shows with but like, I, you see, this is what the Greeks meant by sophroson. It's, it's my salience landscape has been matured, so it's better at tracking the real patterns, the things that really matter. And Spinoza's saying, well, you can take that further as the child is to the adult is to the sage. You can love reality so much that things that used to be so tempting to you, it's not like you have to hold yourself back from them. They just become unthinkable to you. And he described that's the state of blessedness. That's the state of blessedness.
Is the understanding or realization of life's limitations and that there is a suffering associated with it is the key to that love? Because we can imagine a universe where, okay, I have a, let's say, son. I know that my son is going to be immortal no matter what happens. Nothing
Yeah.
bad is going to happen. Then, like the whole structure collapses. And if we think about this
Oh,
in utopian terms in the futuristic scenario, then it leads to somewhere that we can't even recognize.
it leads to very dark places. Is what I've put on my. I said, put on my tombstone. Neither nostalgia nor utopia. Nostalgias get us sort of fundamentalisms that are bloodthirsty, and utopias get us totalitarianisms that are bloodthirsty. Um, yeah, this is something that Heidegger um, and our embodied mortality is central to our being reasonable, and it's central to us being moral and virtuous. Another, a Stoic and or Buddhist practice is to realize that if you were immortal, you would inevitably end up being immoral. You would become a grotesque supervillain. Uh, be- be- just just sheer amount of time, because you'd have to be absolutely perfect to not have errors. And like, I don't I mean, I do all these practices and so they help. I mean, I really don't want to live forever. I mean, I'll step out of traffic if a car's going to hit me. I don't mean that level of instinct that I share with an ant. I mean, when I think of all the ways I'm guilty and all the ways I've failed and all the ways in which I've been a fool, including up till today, right? I don't want that to go on forever. I Death is a gift. Um, it's a gift. It's a gift such that life is bearable to us.
There's this line from a movie. It says, "Yeah, you live long enough. You either die a hero or live long enough to become a villain or something."
Yeah,
So
exactly, exactly. I mean, the Stoics said that the thing is, try not to horizontally live as long as you can. What you want to is live as deeply as you can, so that once you've touched eternity, you don't need to live forever anymore. And then you are free. Then you're free from fate. Because insofar as you're pursuing immortality, you're bound up to all the systems and all the machinery and all the endless return of the same. But if you touch eternity, you cut yourself. I mean, this is also the Upanishads, it's also Buddhism. You cut yourself free from that bondage. I mean, it's funny because Tolkien does this in The Lord of the Rings. Iluvatar gives men mortality, and it's called the gift of Iluvatar. And then the Numenorians come to hate it, and because they want to live forever like the elves, and then they become really evil. Right? Yeah, I think that's right. Melville does it in Moby Dick. When Father Maple says, "What is man that he should live out the lifetime of his God?" Namely, uh, human beings shouldn't want to do that. Um,
yeah, I'm guilty of not finishing Moby Dick. I've started several times. I think there are so many details also, but I need to finish that book. Yeah, seriously. Now
it's a
that you
great
mention,
novel. Yeah, it's a great novel. Um, And I wish people would go back to wrestling with it. I understand. Listen, please. I'm speaking to people in general, not you. I understand why we need to criticize, an author's political positions and things like that. That's important. We don't want to. We don't want to idolize people, especially if they've done things that we like that we reject, right? But we also don't want to do that at the expense of actually wrestling with the artistry of the work.
Yeah, I mean, the people are flawed, and that's everyone is flawed in their nature. And we are talking about the philosophers that lived in different times, different cultural conditions, and dismissing them just because they don't, their ideas, some of their ideas do not subscribe to what we believe today, doesn't really make sense.
And it's unfair and it's lazy. It's easy to step out and say, well, there's no women on the ship in Moby Dick. It's like, okay, is that just because that's the way it was and Melville was, was a sailor, and so he's writing what he knows. Uh, Maybe he's in some intricate and subtle way enforcing a patriarchy. I get that, but that's not a reason to not read the damn book. And because it's a book about the advent of the meaning crisis in American society, a society that was in looked like it was becoming what it has become, the preeminent superpower of the world. That's important to wrestle with that and understand that.
And the question is,
Anyway,
if you lived in 19th century, 18th century, 17th century, what would you be? You wouldn't be what you believe today.
and it's a self-defeating position, because if we reject people because they don't have our current moral position, guess what people 50 years from now get to do to us? Reject us and our moral positions. And that means we're ultimately in a self-defeating stance towards human beings.
Yeah, there
Like,
will be probably.
unless you somehow believe foolishly that you are somehow have reached the peak of human perfection.
Yeah, we've been having a fascinating discussion around these topics. I'm enjoying it. It's great. I have one final question, and a very
Please.
specific question. So yeah, it's a bit personal one. So I am very ignorant when it comes to 20th century philosophers. Philosopher. I know you mentioned Heidegger today.
And
Would
Wittgenstein, yeah.
would that
Yeah.
be, or Wittgenstein? Would those be the good starting point, or would you recommend any other author or
I,
thinker?
I mean, it's good to start with secondary literature about, and very current secondary literature, not literature even 20 years ago. Very current literature around secondary literature around Wittgenstein and Heidegger, and also literature that interweaves them together, and shows what they're doing. And then go forward from Heidegger into people like Merleau-Ponty, and go forward from Wittgenstein into sort of how the analytic tradition destroyed itself, Quine and Putnam, so Putnam and Dreyfus would be good people to represent. Like, Putnam represents the Wittgensteinian legacy, Dreyfus the Heideggerian Merleau-Ponty legacy, connections into cognitive science. That's what I would recommend. But I would also recommend reading, What is Ancient Philosophy by Hadot, or Philosophy as a Way of Life, so that you get an understanding of how modern philosophy is different from ancient philosophy, a deep understanding.
If there is one idea that you want people to take away from this conversation that we had, what would that be?
Meaning, reason, love, beauty, all the things that we think help us realize are between. They're not in you subjectively, they're not in the world objectively. They are between, really between, binding, religio, between you and the world, co created by you and the world. You participate in reality, and it participates in you.
John, thank you so much. You are great. I really enjoyed this conversation. Learned a lot as well myself. It has been great. And we are gonna also put the link to your channel in the description so that people can go out and check out your work as well.
Yeah, if I could ask you to also put the link to the lectern, that's where people want to take any online courses with me. Uh, that's available as well. So all the stuff on YouTube, that's free. And then if you want, if you want to take a more full blown, course, that's behind a paywall, very reasonable, very competitive, all that sort of stuff. We want to do that virtuously. But those are the two venues in which, if you want to take up more, both the YouTube channel and then the Lectern platform.
Lectern, yeah, that's spelled as Lectern. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been wonderful. I really enjoyed it a lot. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening or watching. If you want to stay updated on future episodes, please follow the show on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. Please also consider leaving a like on YouTube or a review on Spotify, as this helps the show reach a lot of people. You can also leave comments if you have any personal thoughts on the topics discussed during the episode. More conversations and solo episodes are on the way in the following weeks, and following the show is the best way to be notified about them. If you would like to reach out to me directly, you can DM me on Instagram at philosophy.everyday. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.